On this episode of the Inside Athletic Training Podcast, we're joined by Darryl Conway, Executive Senior Associate Athletic Director and Chief Health and Welfare Officer at the University of Michigan, and a member of the NATA Hall of Fame class of 2024. In this conversation, we'll discuss emergency action planning in baseball and across sports, building off Darryl's recent presentation at the 2026 Baseball Team Medicine Conference. Enjoy the show. All right, Darryl, welcome to the Inside Athletic Training Podcast. Super excited to have you on to share some awesome information that you recently shared at the Baseball Team Medicine Conference in Scottsdale in January on emergency action planning in baseball. To start today, I wanted to give you a couple minutes to introduce yourself to our audience and let them know what you're doing now. You have a laundry list of accolades and things that you're working on right now, including the Executive Senior Associate Athletic Director and Chief Welfare and Health Officer at the University of Michigan Athletics. But yeah, tell the listeners about yourself, what you're doing now, and kind of your background information.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me on the podcast. It's my day job, Executive Senior Associate Athletic Director and Chief Health and Welfare Officer at the University of Michigan Athletics, where I oversee pretty much all of health and welfare within the athletic department, also active on several different emergency management, crisis management, and infectious disease committees within the university. Also owner of Conway Ventures, which is a private consulting company that I own that does consulting throughout the United States on emergency management. And then co-owner, president and chief operating officer of Sports Medicine Emergency Management. That's a company I myself and Ed Strapp own that goes out and works with teams, works with colleges, works with physical therapy clinics on emergency action planning, emergency management, skills training, and then scenario-based rehearsals. Also work as a consultant with Stryker, Easy EAP, and RG Medical Diagnostics, and I'm privileged enough to sit on the board of the Sudden Cardiac Arrest Foundation and the Medical Science Advisory Board, the Corey Stringer Institute, and then just recently was appointed to the board of AT Last, a nonprofit organization looking to bring AT services to lower socioeconomic communities.
That's great. And obviously your hands all over the athletic training community and the profession. You have so much going on right now, as you just mentioned. Talk about how you got into the profession, athletic training. What kind of sparked your interest? Was it something at school? Was it, a lifelong dream of yours to be in the position you're in? How'd you get started in the profession?
I actually got introduced to the profession when I was in 8th grade. I was going to Art Monk's football camp in Maryland. Art Monk was a receiver with the Redskins at the time and just happened to be walking out to practice one day, walked by a room, and Keoki Kamu, who was an assistant athletic trainer at the Redskins, was taping an ankle. And it just amazed me at how fast he was going at the time. So I stood and watched him tape 3 or 4 ankles. He kind of saw me standing there, asked me, did I need anything? I'm like, no, I'm just amazed at what you're doing. And basically spent the week when I had free time in the athletic training room with him, kind of learning the profession, and then spent, the next 4 years in high school going up to Redskins training camp in the summer times, keeping correspondence with him and really getting involved in the profession as a high school student. Attended the Kramer workshops that were being put on by Kramer during that time, and, went to the University of Delaware. Undergraduate, got lucky when I was at the University of Delaware and was selected to be an athletic training student at the New York Jets. So I spent 3 summers actually with the New York Jets as a student, and then was lucky enough when Pepper Burris left the Jets to go to Green Bay. They actually hired me full-time at the Jets right out of school.
Cool. And what was that like? Right out of school, that's kind of unique these days with so much more schooling and education and also just competitive nature of the profession. What was that like? Did you feel prepared coming out of school, jumping right into working with the Jets, or what was the kind of learning curve for you like?
Yeah, I felt prepared as a young professional. I don't think as athletic trainers you're ever 100% prepared. I think
Sure.
there's always something that you can learn. But yes, I felt prepared as a young professional. Had a great experience at the University of Delaware, and great preparation there from my mentors there. And then obviously spending 3 summers with them, kind of understood what was going to go on. And then Bob Reese and Joe Patton and especially Pepper were great mentors and helped me along my transition once we got there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And talk a bit about, what you're doing today with the University of Michigan. I know it's a very important role, and you talked about some of the duties and responsibilities. How long have you been with the university? And what's kind of your day-to-day like for University of Michigan athletics?
So finishing up my 13th season here at the university. And essentially, I oversee all aspects of health and welfare. So that includes athletic medicine, performance nutrition, performance science, our pause unit, or our performance psychology and wellness services, or our mental health
Hmm.
team, our equipment team, and our strength and conditioning team. So really anything that touches an athlete from a health and welfare performance standpoint, I oversee those staffs. And I have a great group of professionals working with me. I always joke I'm not the brains of the organization. I just pay the bills. They do an incredible job. They make my job easy every single
Hmm.
day. And I always feel that, I'm working for them on a daily basis. They aren't working for me. It's my job to work for them and make their job easier and give them everything they need and support them along the journey to really, you know, take care of our student athletes and take care of their health and welfare, put their health and welfare first, and make sure that in all aspects, 360 degrees comprehensive, that they're being taken care of.
Yeah, well, Darryl, you, as I mentioned, you spoke at the baseball team medicine conference on emergency action planning in baseball. I thought in person, being there, your speech and presentation was awesome, very informative, and that's why kind of we wanted to have you on here today to share that with people that weren't there. A couple quotes that you started the presentation with, most notably, "Are you prepared for the ultimate emergency?" I think that's the question a lot of athletic trainers are asking and should be asking. You kind of broke open the presentation talking about why is it important to be prepared. You talked about the 4 H's, which was very interesting. Talk about just the overall importance for baseball athletic trainers, regardless of level, why they should be paying attention to this information.
I think, from us working with teams over the last 4 to 5 years with their emergency rehearsals, the one thing we've noticed in baseball compared to a lot of the teams we work with in the NFL is that I think the quote to me 3 or 4 years ago was that there are 800,000 pitches a year in Major
Sure.
League Baseball, and that's just the season. That's not um, that's not spring training. That's not fall
Right.
instructs and everything else. That's just the season. There are 800,000 pitches, and there were 7 field extractions. So 7 times a player had to be extracted from the field, and an emergent field extraction. I mean, they're put on a spine board, they're put on a stretcher.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Compared to you can get 7 field extractions in a game in football. Um, so when you think about it, Major League Baseball doesn't get emergencies that often. But when you do get them in Major League Baseball, there's some horrific injuries, whether or not it's people being hit with a pitch ball, the pitcher being hit with a comebacker, some violent collisions in the outfield, some violent collisions at the bases. So
Hmm.
you need to be prepared for it when that happens. And I think that's why Major League Baseball has started to take a closer look at everything that goes on. I think the other thing with Major League Baseball and really baseball in general is it's not just the 9 guys on the field. You have
Sure.
guys down in the bullpen, you have guys back in the clubhouse, you have guys in batting cages, you have guys lifting during the game, you have guys all over that stadium that those athletic trainers are responsible for. So we always like to talk about think outside the lines.
Hmm.
Most staffs are very well situated for something happening inside the lines, but it's the cardiac arrest in the bullpen. how is that communication coming from the bullpen? Who's running out to the bullpen? What bags are you taking? How is EMS getting to the bullpen? The medical emergency that happens underneath the dugout in the batting cage, back in the
Yeah.
clubhouse. Those are all the things that kind of complicate things with Major League Baseball just on a game day, but let alone, they're there 6-8 hours before a game when EMS isn't there. And you're relying on, a 911 EMS system in a stadium.
Sure.
And then you look at their spring training facilities and they're 6 or 7 baseball fields large. Whereas you look at an NFL training facility, it's usually 2, maybe 3 football fields at the most. A Major League Baseball facility is 6 or 7, actual baseball fields, plus a couple half fields, plus batting cages, plus 9 to 15 person bullpens, plus the facility. So it's a lot for them to think about, a lot for them to cover, and then you get into the travel. 82 games, flying all across the country, flying in the middle of the night. A lot of times, what happens in that travel, what happens in the hotel, how do you manage all that? It's a lot for them to think about, and they do a good job, but it's a lot for them to think about. And I just wanted to put that out there in the stratosphere for baseball athletic trainers that is more than just between the lines.
Sure. And what I thought was really interesting is you talked about the mental fitness of an athletic trainer. And I think you said, the fitness after the event and your mental state there is going to depend on your preparation. I want to get your opinion on, are athletic trainers thinking about this enough? Are they working on their mental abilities and fitness to handle the situation? And you called it the moment that will come or could potentially come at some point in their careers. How do you feel that today's athletic trainers are handling that, getting ready for the moment, as you mentioned?
I think they're doing a better job than what we've traditionally done, because I think it's been promoted more. More and more leagues, Major League Baseball came on board this year with mandating emergency action plan rehearsals. The NFL has been there for 10 or 12 plus years. Basketball came on board a couple years ago. Hockey's all been there for a while. But I think, DeMar Hamlin really made people realize that this could happen at any time. And so that's made people really bear down and really practice. I think the advent of high fidelity mannequins and all the different simulators that are out there now have really helped really do a true rehearsal, not just put somebody on a backboard, but really run through a true rehearsal of your emergency action plan, which I think once we do that with the teams, it makes them start to think, and it makes them say, "Ooh, I'm not prepared for that moment. I'm prepared as soon as I get there. I'm prepared to take care of the ABCs, but actually getting there, what bags am I bringing? How am I communicating? How is EMS getting there? How we're getting them off the field? What hospital are we going to? All of those different things that go into a successful emergency, they realize probably haven't thought of that before. I'm probably not as prepared as I want to be to make it go seamless."
Yeah, and that's kind of what I want to touch on next. Is you mentioned who's involved. I think at the conference you called it the pit crew, like in NASCAR or car racing. There's referees, coaches, equipment staff, faculty, interns. There's so many people involved in these situations. When training and preparing for this, you mentioned that, hey, remember, you're not alone. Talk about who all goes into this process and what you guys train people on, and how you activate certain people to understand their roles. Talk about that whole process, seeing as it is almost like a pit crew involved in the situation.
Yeah, I think that, the biggest thing is you just kind of take an all-encompassing view of it. I two things that I always subscribe to is you want to have the smartest room, not be the smartest in the room. So who are those people that you're building around you that are smarter than you? And then the school bus theory, get the right people on the bus but most importantly, get them in the right seats. And
Mm-hmm.
that bus is very comprehensive too, that you have to get the right people on the bus for that emergency. And the right people on the bus may be a custodian, because a custodian has all the keys. They know all the entrances.
Sure.
The right people on the bus may be a principal. It may be a police officer. It may be the fire marshal. So really getting the right people on the bus and getting them in the right seats at a specific time during the emergency, and understanding that lay rescuers are going to be important in that emergency 99% of the time. Major League Baseball is Disney World. You have 4 or 5 athletic trainers, you have physical therapists, you have doctors at every game, you have EMS. Now they're starting to put EMS in their dugouts, and then you have EMS out in the outfield somewhere. That's Disney World compared to single A ball, Florida Gulf Coast ball at 12 noon in Tampa during the summer, where you don't have EMS. You're in Poughkeepsie, New York. At single A or double A, you probably don't have EMS at the game, or if you do have EMS at the game, they aren't dedicated to the field. They're there for that stadium, and there's one EMS crew. It's there for the stadium, and if grandma is having a heart attack in the stands, when something happens on the field, that EMS is going to that going to that heart attack. So you may be dealing with that for 10, 15 minutes.
Sure.
Before another EMS unit can get there. So I think that's where it's important to really think broadly of what can happen when, and who can I use in that emergency. I like to say, activating the EAP is not calling the athletic trainer. So I think your coaches, your staff need to understand that if something happens in the batting cage, activating the EAP is not you leaving and going out and grabbing the athletic trainer from the dugout, because you never know if that athletic trainer is going to be in a dugout. That athletic trainer could be out looking at a center fielder who twisted their knee.
Mm-hmm.
So activating the EAP is dialing 911 or whatever your emergency response is, starting CPR, and then, send somebody to get the AED, send somebody to get the athletic trainer, but you need to be prepared to act in an emergency. And then what is everybody's job? Everybody has a role. People can open doors. People can move furniture out of the way. People can help carry equipment. People, if you watch the Mar Hamlin video, there were 250 patients on the field that day. Everybody but the Mar was in total shock, PTSD. Yeah. So your role in emergency may not be to do CPR. Your role in emergency may be to take the team back to the locker room, to talk to the team, to just understand, hey, this guy's not acting right as a response to this injury. I need to get him to our mental health professional, or I need to let somebody else know. Your role in emergency may be opening the gate, flagging down EMS, going and grabbing the parents or the spouse and getting them to where they need to get to. Everybody has a role, and it's that emergency is very similar to a NASCAR or a Formula One pit crew. Mm-hmm. There's a reason that they can get 4 tires and an entire tank of gas in 7 seconds, because they practice it. Everybody that jumps over that wall has a role.
Yeah.
And in order for that to happen, everybody has to do their role. And if you equate that to an emergency, everybody has a role. And in order for that person to be saved or cared for, everybody has to do their job, because we could be doing great health care at the person, but if EMS is circling the stadium, if EMS never gets called, if EMS is standing outside of a gate, banging on the gate, trying to get in, then something's going to happen that we probably don't want.
Sure.
If your role is to open that gate, you need to make sure you're doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one thing I found incredibly interesting was you talked about the layers of an emergency, anywhere from recognition to activation, all the way to debriefing about what happened. But you also touched on common failure points. How do you go about training athletic trainers and sports medicine professionals to ensure they're knowledgeable about what the most common failure points are and how to avoid those when time comes?
I think it's a didactic piece where we're talking about that, but I really think it's the rehearsal.
Hmm.
Um, it's the rehearsal piece. This also comes into your practice and training of when you let somebody see it live in a rehearsed scenario,
Yeah.
they can see that, oh, that looks great on paper. That's a great idea in theory, but it's not going to work the way it may work, or you want it to work. You can see that all the time in rehearsal, and once they've done it in rehearsal and they've realized that, yeah, that's not going to work the way we think it's going to work,
Hmm.
then they realize. And baseball is a perfect example. We've done work with teams where they have beautiful emergency bags. Nice big emergency bags have everything you need in it. There's more stock than the ambulance sometimes. Oxygen tank,
Okay.
splints, everything's in their emergency bag. And that's all great. And it's right next to the athletic trainer at the far end of the dugout. It's a color, it's labeled first aid, it's labeled emergency. But when something happens in center field or something happens in that bullpen, and you have to grab that bag and run 400 feet with that bag, that 50-pound emergency bag isn't as efficient and useful as what it looks like when it's
That's right.
sitting there. you know so that's a common failure point when you talk about resource delays, when you talk about communication, when you talk about all those different things. That's an opportunity for them to see in training, hey,
Yeah.
we're going to run a scenario in center field and you're going to be in the dugout. Now
Hmm.
you have to get that bag out there. Can we do a smaller bag that has the necessities in it that you can just throw over your shoulder and run with?
Yeah.
And we work with the teams on that of, it's great to have a nice centralized big bag, but when you have to run and you have to be mobile, that really doesn't work the same way that you need it to work.
Yeah, and you talk about having the best stuff and having the best plan, and ultimately, if people aren't trained and aware of what's going on and have the ability to react, it doesn't matter. One portion of your presentation that was really cool, and I think kind of, in my opinion, maybe underrated, is documentation of the plan. Where can I find it? Is it written down? Is it posted in numerous places? You shared a cool example of University of Michigan athletic medicine and the EAP there for an arena. Talk about the importance of documentation, where to share that information, how often that's refreshed, and just overall that whole strategy.
Yeah, so I think, obviously documentation comes into account before, during, and after the
Hmm.
emergency. Before the emergency, we want to have good EAPs. We want to make sure that they're posted. We want to have policies, procedures, clinical practice guidelines, make sure everyone knows what our policy and procedure is with regards to a heat emergency, with regards to a orthopedic emergency, with regards to cervical spine emergency, and make sure that that policy procedure guideline is practiced, rehearsed, trained. Then during the emergency, I think the documentation comes in vital signs trending. We want to trend vital signs. Our first set of vital signs gives us a little bit of information. It's really the second, third, fourth, and fifth set of vital signs that really illustrates how that patient is doing.
Hmm.
As we're taking those vital signs, somebody needs to be writing them down. So making sure, again, when we talk about that pit crew, who is in that pit crew and what's your role? Your role may be just to grab a sheet of paper, grab my notepad and a pen and start writing down numbers so that I can have them and I can see, because in the moment, I may not see that their blood pressure is rising and their pulse is lowering because
Yeah.
they're just numbers being spit out. But when I can see them on a sheet, hey, his blood pressure keeps rising every single time we take it. It's a different number, and that number is higher. Oh, that's a key piece of information.
Hmm.
So that's the um, during the emergency documentation. Then after, it's obviously important to document what happened for that emergency. Just for good medical records and good legal purposes, but also it's important to have a good debrief
Yeah.
afterwards. And that debrief is going to be one of three different times. You're going to have your hot debrief that happens right away. Like, so as you're walking back to the dugout, as soon as you get back in that dugout, you're going to look at your colleague and say, how'd that go? Is there anything we missed? Is there anything we should have done? Did everybody get communicated appropriately? That's your hot debrief after the game. You're going to have a warm debrief of kind of once you walk back into that athletic training room, when you're on the bus, you're on the plane, you're going to be like, hey, how did everything go? Is there anything we need to restock for tomorrow? And then about a week later, you're going to convene everyone that was involved in that emergency, from the dispatcher to the person who called 911 to EMS, everyone, stadium personnel, everyone that was involved in that emergency. And you're going to review it top to bottom. What went well, what didn't go well, what do we want to change? Review every single step top to bottom. And that's your cold debrief. That's very comprehensive in nature, but that's also documentation of how can I improve next time if this were to happen again.
Yeah, and I think kind of the teamwork aspect that you mentioned there is super important. And you talked about in your presentation about the EAP coordinator. Obviously, in baseball, there is a head athletic trainer who oversees the major league staff, sometimes a director of medical who's above them. And in the minor leagues, maybe, there's a minor league coordinator who communicates with all the affiliates. There's so much coordination going on in the game of baseball. But when it comes to the emergency action plan coordinator, how do you recommend people designate a coordinator? And then what are those roles and responsibilities for the coordinator who's in charge of that process?
I think, again, you have to take a close look at your personnel and find the best person for the job. And that's a person who's going to, A, be willing to do the job, but also B, be knowledgeable about the job, and C, able to take a 30,000 foot view of everything. Your roles and responsibilities as the EAP coordinator, you obviously should walk the facility. You should determine appropriate staffing. You should determine appropriate entrances and exits, and really be responsible for developing, modifying, reviewing that emergency action plan. What equipment is needed? Where do I get the equipment from? What is everybody's roles and responsibilities in an emergency, all the way down the list to the person who's opening gates, who's calling 911, all of that information. So, to me, I'm always an expert's never an expert in their own house. So to me, I always look to somebody outside of my organization to be that EAP coordinator. I love fire chiefs. I love battalion chiefs. I love fire EMS training coordinators. I love the fire marshal. They're outside. They're able to take a 360-degree view of everything, a 30,000 foot view of everything. But also, you're building relationships in the community. If you're inviting that fire chief in and giving them a walkthrough of your facility and inviting them to be part of your team, when you need them, they're going to be there for you. When you need something, when you use your AED and you need another AED at the rest of the game, they're going to be there for you. When you need additional staffing, when you want to change staffing, when you need various vehicles, they're going to be there for you when you've developed those relationships ahead of time.
And specifically when it comes to the role of the athletic trainer, you talked a bit in the presentation about the readiness check for the athletic trainer. Do we have the team in place? What's the weather like? Planning, is it documented? Communication, so many other things like relationships, like you mentioned. Talk about your guidance for the athletic trainer preparing and just being ready.
I think we do readiness checks every single day and we don't realize it. I think it's just really formalizing an athletic trainer readiness check or daily readiness check. And it doesn't have to take 5 minutes to do. They're just simple things. Is the AED in place? Is the AED working? Do we have our equipment out in the dugout? Have we checked our equipment lately? Who's on my pit crew today? Yes, I have an assistant athletic trainer. I have a strength coach. I have a dietitian on my team at, say, AA. But the assistant athletic trainer is taking somebody to a physician's visit. So that assistant athletic trainer, she may be involved as the B person in my pit crew, but she's not there. So somebody else is going to have to step up to the B person, or it's going to have to go all the way up But now when
Yeah.
she comes back, she's going to reassume that role. So who's on my pit crew? Thinking about that as you're walking out to practice, beginning your day, of who's on your pit crew. Do they understand what their roles and responsibilities are? And really just going through a quick mental check
Yeah.
every single day when you walk into the venue.
Yeah, and when you talk, so much of this presentation is about preparation, but obviously when you get into the moment, as you call it, stressors are different. Mental stability is different. All athletic trainers work in stressful environments. There's people's health is in their hands. You talked about the psychological load, planning for stress, training for these situations, motor control, memory, vision, all that very important stuff. How important is it for the athletic trainer to prepare mentally as much as documenting and training physically and packing the right bags and things like that?
I think that's the most important piece of it, is being able to go through a mental rehearsal, going through a scenario based rehearsal, actually, and understanding how to operate in a stressful manner.
Sure.
And we there are tons of examples through sports. There are tons of examples through healthcare of people not operating in a stressful manner. And you uh, just look at sports. March Madness is coming up. How many times have one of those players, if you just send them into a gym, they can hit foul shot after foul shot after foul shot. But now when there's 1.3 seconds left and you're down by one and you have the opportunity to step up to the line for two foul shots, you choke and
Hmm.
you don't do it. Even though in a non-stressful situation, you could hit that foul shot, all the time. Same thing in baseball. You know, if you ask the pitcher just to throw over to first in a casual warm up, or a second baseman to field a grounder, throw to first in a casual nature, they can do that all day at that
Yeah.
level. But now you up it, it's the bottom of the ninth, this base is loaded, there's two outs. You have to make this play to win the World Series. You have to make this play to go on to the next round. And that second baseman either bobbles a routine ground ball or he throws it way over the first baseman's head. They've
Yeah.
made that throw probably that day alone, between batting practice and fungos and everything else. They probably made that throw 50 times that day
Yeah.
alone. But now it's a stressful situation. They throw it over their head.
Yeah.
Those are things how we have to train in a stressful manner. And that's what we try to do from the scenario-based rehearsals, is get them to train in a stressful manner so that their heart rate's getting up and they're actually having to think on the spot of what's going on. Then it just becomes second nature to you,
Hmm.
that you're doing that.
Yeah. And Darryl, one of the most interesting parts of the presentation I thought was you talked about the mental health crisis plan. What's your plan? Who are you collaborating with? Coaches, athletic trainers, administration. Talk about the mental health side of this and then the crisis plan that you outlined during the presentation.
Well, I think, a mental health crisis is an emergency, and sometimes we have plans. Many times people have never thought about a mental health emergency. So I think it's
Yeah.
very important that A, you have a plan. Also, B, you practice your mental health plan as much as you practice a plan for a broken leg or a plan for a cervical spine injury. And then really understanding, what is a mental health emergency? What is a mental health crisis? What is a mental health concern? And what are our pathways for referral there? Really thinking through, the mental health emergencies, the real significant anxiety, depression, the suicidal ideation, self-harm. Those are our big mental health emergencies. And then how are we handling those emergencies when they happen? Who are we going to refer them to? Do we have those numbers available? How are we going to get them help? How are we going to talk to the athlete
Hmm.
that's having a mental health emergency? Where do we place ourselves in the room? All of those different aspects that go into managing the mental health emergency, the same way we would manage a fractured ankle. We know where our splints are. We know how we're going to splint it. We know what hospital they're going to, all of those things. The same thing you have to do for that mental health crisis, that mental health emergency. Who am I going to call? What am I going to say to the athlete? Do I know what what the emergency number is for the suicide hotline. Do I have that in my phone? Do I have it on my desk? Do I know the 988 suicide and crisis lifeline that you can dial from any phone? And really making sure that we have all of that in place for a mental health emergency.
Mm-hmm. And Darryl, kind of thinking about the whole presentation in and of itself, we have many different listeners, from students to people at the top of the field in all sports. If someone's an athletic trainer and they feel like maybe they aren't as prepared as they should be after listening to this podcast or hearing from you, what's your best piece of information for people looking to improve their emergency action planning process?
I would say consult with somebody. It doesn't always have to be an athletic trainer. You can just consult with your police, consult with EMS, but consult with somebody and really sit down and have a skull session. I always say if it's predictable, it's manageable. If we can predict something's going to happen, we should be able to manage it, or we should at least thought about how we're going to manage it. And as athletic trainers, we're vultures on a perch. Our perch is in that dugout, and we're that vulture on the side of the road on a telephone pole, waiting for that squirrel or waiting for that rabbit to run across the road and get hit and be injured because I'm going to swoop down and I have dinner tonight. Sure. Same way as athletic trainers, we're that vulture waiting for somebody to be injured because we're going to run out, we're going to swoop down, and we're going to take care of them. So if it's predictable, it's manageable. Can I predict that a third baseman, a left fielder, and a shortstop could all collide going for a foul ball? Well, yes, that you see that happen all the time. What happens if all of them collide and they're unresponsive? How am I going to handle that? What have I thought about? So really thinking through emergencies of how you would handle it. What would you do? What resources do I have? What resources do I need? How can I communicate? And as an athletic trainer thinking about it, now you can start to put some plans on paper. You can start to talk things out. Who's going to call 911? Is my coach prepared to help me? How can they help me? Mm-hmm. Thinking about all of those different things in an emergency, and then actually repping it out and rehearsing it, just like your team would. Your team would never run a first and third play or a pickoff to second base without repping it multiple times during the game. It's the same thing here. We have to rep it. We have to rep it mentally. We have to rep it physically, and we have to rep it practically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Darryl, this has been awesome. Just hearing about the presentation in more detail from you. For final words here today, for the many different varying levels of athletic trainers listening here, what's the biggest take home in terms of messaging that you'd like to leave with an athletic trainer?
I think you have to practice. You have to rehearse. And you have to think about what can happen and am I prepared? And ask yourself that all the time. Am I prepared for that to happen? And then also think about who's on your pit crew. Mm-hmm. Who can you depend on to help you? And do they know what to do? Are they prepared what to do? Do they know what color bag it is, where your emergency equipment is, what your emergency hand signals are, so that they're prepared to help in that emergency?
Yeah, that's great. Great information there. And Darryl, we always appreciate everything you do for PBATS and the profession of athletic training, and wish you and everybody up at Michigan best of luck as March Madness gets underway here.
No problem. Thank you guys, and hope you guys have a good start to the season. It's exciting that spring training's going on.
Yeah, appreciate it, Darryl. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Inside Athletic Training Podcast. For more information about PBATS and the profession of athletic training, visit pbats.com. See you next time.